So this is a Year 8 English lesson about argument analysis, and I guess it's just breaking down an article preparation for an assessment. Not too much work has been done on structure or things yet, just kind of the basic elements, and we're looking at, I guess, an article that could be used for an assessment and how to kind of pull apart some of the things in that in a reasonable level of depth. So let's get stuck in. Again, we're just going to be pulling apart some of the key elements in that in an article. So let's move across to that article now. So our piece is Listening for the Sound of Silence. It's by Warwick McFadyen, who's pictured here. Okay, so there are a few kind of things we can draw from this already. Already we've got the author's name, which is critical, I guess, when introducing him. Throughout the piece, you would refer to him as McFadyen, Mr. McFadyen, the author, or Warwick McFadyen. Please don't call him Warwick. It's something that a lot of students kind of fall into the traps of doing, referring to an author on friendly terms, which probably isn't formal enough for an assessment task. He's pictured there. Now, there's a few things we can draw, I guess, from this image. He's quite stern looking. You know, he looks quite serious. Maybe he's an authority or someone who we should listen to. There's no real inclination of, or no real clues as to his political affiliations beyond writing in The Age at this point. But the picture there and the fact that, as we'll find out later, this piece is about technology gives us a bit of information in that you can probably assume he might be more hesitant to engage in technology than perhaps a younger writer would. And, you know, the fact that he's writing in The Age rather than on an online publication, you can perhaps deduce that that coupled with the age presented in that image would suggest, you know, he's going to be more restrained when it comes to the use or applications of technology. Unless, of course, his opinion differs from that. But that's something we can perhaps draw from that. Okay, so published February 11th, 2019, relatively recent, and in The Age again. So a hard copy print piece, which is, you know, quite significant when looking at who the target readership of this piece might be. Okay, title, Listening for the Sound of Silence. So we've got a bit of a joke in there because obviously silence doesn't have a sound. He's perhaps trying to, I guess, draw a curious response from his reader, and they might, you know, want to read on because it doesn't really give too much away. But as we know, silence doesn't have a sound, so there's something going on there language-wise. All right, he begins with I, you know, provides an anecdote, a personal kind of approach to this story, perhaps trying to, I guess, identify with his reader through the story he provides. So, I misplaced my mobile the other day. It stayed misplaced for a couple of hours. I didn't miss it. It didn't seem to have missed me. Okay, so already we get the feeling that perhaps, you know, he's not going to be overtly positive to unrestrained use of technology, okay? Because he's set it up with this personal story about losing his mobile and not missing it, okay? So that's quite critical, I guess, in trying to roughly figure out what kind of angle he might take here, okay? Yeah, so, and again, you know, he's relating the issue back to himself. It's a low-level issue. It's not something that a standard reader is going to be able to, no, it is something that a standard reader is going to be able to relate to. He then continues, so why is there a constant ringing in my ear? Ringing, of course, playing on the idea of a mobile phone ringing and, you know, this idea that it's constantly bothering him. I have to get this. It's important. It demands my attention. There are estimated to be 17 million smartphone users in Australia and worldwide more than 2 billion. Okay, that's quite a strong statistic that he's just used there. We've got to consider that the population of Australia is what, roughly 24, 25 million. 17 million of those people use smartphones. We've got to consider a significant portion of that population would be children or, you know, people who are either too young or too old to really engage with this technology or be in a state where they're engaging with this technology. He continues, saying a smartphone is a handy tool is, of course, somewhat of an understatement. You could quite possibly live with only your smartphone and your clean underwear. So again, we see a kind of humorous approach here. He's playing quite light with the topic, which of course, it's not heavy topic matter. It's not something ultimately that serious, but you know, he's definitely not taking a doom and gloom kind of approach here. You know, it's obviously a joke that you could live with only your smartphone and clean underwear, because, you know, he hasn't made mention of water or basic things that you would need to survive, but he's just setting up that he does acknowledge the importance of the smartphone. And he's done so in quite a humorous way, which of course, you know, is going to engage the reader. And I guess he's trying also not to alienate tech users at this point, because if he came out strongly kind of condemning technology, then, you know, some readers might take offense to that or take an issue with that and therefore become unengaged with the piece. So he's acknowledged its significance. The phone is undoubtedly a mark of progress in the ascent of man to a higher plane with Wi-Fi. But can a good thing be entirely a good thing if another good thing is subverted by it along the way? Okay, so what he's saying here, and it is a touch wordy, is that, you know, can we ultimately glorify smartphones if we're losing something to gain the benefits they provide? Okay, so he's saying smartphones are good and they're something that's important in society today, but we're losing something through their, I guess, application. Then what we have here is this image, okay? It's a hand holding an iPhone-like phone, a smartphone, and it's chained or shackled to the wrist of the hand. Okay, there's all kinds of imagery here, but basically it's an image to make, I guess, the reader feel negatively towards smart technology, even though our author, McFadyen, hasn't openly condemned technology as of yet, okay? And I guess what you've got to do is consider that what the deliberate kind of purpose of this image is to make the reader feel that perhaps they're being chained to, or I guess, becoming enslaved to their technology, that they themselves are at its service rather than the other way around, which will connect to an idea he presents later on. Further, you know, it's bringing up negative imagery, this idea of slavery and things of that ilk, and connecting them to the technology. Okay, and it's trying to make the reader think about those kind of elements. All right, in the Western world, which is of course Australia, America, Europe, you know, basically the world in which we reside in, the trend is clear. We are on constant call, some more than others, admittedly, but close proximity to communication does not of itself mean that communication is necessary. But what he's saying here is that, you know, whilst we have access to smartphones and we're able to speak to people at a moment's notice all the time, it's not something that we need necessarily. You know, there are situations when which that's helpful, but he's kind of suggesting that that's not always what we require. And that's something that I guess goes hand in hand with that earlier suggestion that perhaps he wouldn't be for unrestrained use of technology, because as we know from that image, he's older, and therefore, you know, he's lived in a world prior to mobile phones, prior to Wi-Fi, prior to this constant call that we're, you know, he suggests we're on. Okay. The phone is the hammer shaping the hand that holds it. And then that connects again to that idea of, I guess, being enslaved to the technology. You know, a hammer crafts and melds metal into particular shapes. He's suggesting that the phones are taking control of people's behavior rather than the owner of the phone necessarily controlling it. And that hammer, I guess, calls back to that idea he suggested, that he was constantly listening out for the ring, that our behavior is being shaped by this technology, and, you know, connects to the image where we're enslaved by it to a degree. That's the kind of thing he wants his reader to think about. A recent British report found that Britons were online more than a day a week, which is double that of a decade ago. And again, we see him calling back to the past and this idea that, you know, before we didn't necessarily need this. The surge was attributed to the increase in the use of smartphones. So it's smartphones he's targeting particularly, which we knew already. Many experts say this dependency has given rise to angst, I guess, ill feelings and insecurity if people are parted from the device or if they do not interact with it. He doesn't go into, I guess, more depth there, but he's kind of connecting the use of mobile phones to wider mental health issues there, you know, feelings of anxiety and things like that. It's not really explicitly explored, but that's what he wants his reader to kind of think about as they read that section. You know, how is this impacting our mental health given it's risen? Okay, and he doesn't explicitly state who the experts are. He just refers to some experts. Okay, And this is how one part of the world is, if not ending, then hurrying into the future. Not with a whimper, but with that ring, a constant alarm in the ear. Okay, so again, we see that almost lament for the past. Okay, he's kind of sad that we're rushing into this tech, I guess, heavy world. You know, he's not saying it's ending, but he's saying we're moving into the future at quite a quick rate. Okay, forget the bang. T.S. Eliot was half right. It may just have the denouement askew. For now, in the normal turning of the day, a horizon is fading into the distance. It is the aloneness of the world, it is the silence. Okay, and there he's touching on this idea that, you know, there's a disconnected element to technology, that we're, I guess, removed in a sense from communication. Just as, you know, this is very different than if we're in a classroom. There's a kind of barrier there created by the technology. The pace of change is akin to how F1 drivers see their race. They don't concentrate on the next corner, they look to the one in the distance. The closest one is already in the past. Such is technological change. So he's kind of used, I guess, that idea of a car moving so fast that you have to think about the bend ahead, not the nearest one to you. And that's the way technology is moving, is it's moving almost too fast to really consider the present. We need to think to the future. And that's kind of what he wants the reader to be considering. Okay. I started writing this in longhand with pen on paper, sitting at a table in the garden. It was a glorious morning. You could look into infinity in the deep blue sky. And yet my mobile phone sat at the table too, for no reason. I wasn't expecting anyone to call. PM unlikely. God, even more so. So again, we see him referring to kind of, I guess, his personal situation, and how he is able to survive to a degree without this technology. You know, he's able to write. The phone's there, but he doesn't need it. And that's that idea that, you know, we don't necessarily need to be on call. And he hammers that home again with a bit of humor. This idea that he's not going to be called by the Prime Minister. He's definitely not going to be called by God on that phone. So why does he need it there? What is so pressing? You know, he's kind of asking the reader to think, is this communication I have through this device always necessary? Or is it something a bit more, I guess, trivial, something that we don't necessarily need? Okay. And, you know, there's a degree of sarcasm in that kind of statement as well. He's kind of making fun of the situation. Okay. And again, we see him highlighting the positive aspects of existing, I guess, not always engaged in technology. You know, he's looking into the sky. It's a glorious morning. You know, he refers to nature because that's almost the opposite of technology, to make the reader, I guess, consider that, you know, while technology has benefits, it's not necessarily glorious in this context as the morning he describes. Okay. Any pinging into the device could wait. It was peaceful, and that's the rub. The interval of waiting, the uninterrupted line of non-intrusion has become an act of defiance. Okay, so he says, you know, he's taking a bit of a stronger approach here, saying, you know, by not using that technology, I'm kind of defying this push into the future. And he wants his reader to consider that, and whether they should be doing that, refraining from accessing their technology a bit more. A momentary one, for after the interlude, I typed the words into a computer and sent them off into cyberspace. But for a time, however, an inner stillness was found. Okay, so what he does there is he's kind of acknowledging the need for technology. You know, it's inevitable. He has to ultimately type this into a computer where it'll be printed for it to make its way into this paper. But, you know, he juxtaposes the use of that technology with, you know, writing in a more organic sense, and that he found an inner stillness, that through pushing away from that technology or defying, you know, the kind of grasp of that technology, he found some degree of peace. And that's what he ultimately wants his reader to consider. You know, he does not say, you know, we need to stop using technology or technology is bad, but he wants his reader to think, if I, you know, abstain from using technology constantly, maybe there'll be benefits for me. Maybe I'll find some peace. Do I need to use technology all the time? And then we get Warwick McFadyen is a regular contributor. Okay. So that's the piece there. And I guess, you know, it's quite a solid piece. He does have a clear contention, but there's, you know, it's not really like he's denouncing technology completely. He does acknowledge there's a positive to it. And that's what you need to consider in this and other pieces. You know, they're not always going to be clean cut hating on something or, you know, completely lauding another thing. They might have a balance of both. And that's what we see McFadyen do here. You know, he kind of loathes his reliance on technology, but does ultimately acknowledge in today's world, it's necessary and it's required. Okay. So that's that. Good luck. Feel free, if you're, you know, completing any work on this article and using this video as an aid, to watch over it again, because that will probably help you, or skip through. I might do some kind of more targeted things on this same article in the future. All right. Thank you very much.